Hey everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today we're continuing my end of year book video series. This is the second video. I've already done one about my most anticipated releases of 2023. I'll link that down below the playlist. Now we're going to talk about all of the books that I put down. So I DNF'd, that's how we call it on Booktube, did not finish. And you're going to see that there are some recurring themes. It's one of my challenges informally lately to learn to put down books because life is too short. If I'm not enjoying a book, whether I'm bored or things annoy me in there, I need to learn to put them down so I can focus on all of the books that I'm actually interested in. So I DNF'd about 20-something books this year. This is the most I've ever done, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it's also been my best year ever in terms of the amount of books that I've finished, but also the amount of 5 stars I've given. So it's probably a good thing. It is difficult, but learning to do that is life-changing. Highly recommend you attempt it. So we're going to go through the list month by month, and you'll see some months I didn't DNF any books. Sometimes it's like 4+. In January, I was in a reading slump, so I did not DNF any books. I forced myself to finish all 6. February, I DNF'd 2. I was actually doing my 1 week, 1 shelf challenge. So I have to pick the number of a shelf and I have to read books solely from that shelf that week. So it makes me read books that I've kind of forgot I own. The first one I put down was the first book in the Culture series, which actually I think I have somewhere, but I need to get rid of it because I didn't enjoy it. I tried a physical copy, then I tried switching to the audiobook, and I don't tend to listen to like hard sci-fi or like even high fantasy as audiobooks because I struggle to follow through. I mean, to be fair, they just throw so many like words at you that don't mean anything. And unless you're like really used to it, it doesn't work for me as audiobooks. Anyway, I was bored. I couldn't follow. I was not interested, not emotionally invested. I barely remember anything about it, so I put it down. Will I give it a second shot? Maybe the series, because they're more companion novels from what I understand, and I had been told that book 1 wasn't the best, so I might try again the series, just not that one. We're done with this one. The second one was my first 1 star of the year. It's going to be very controversial when I talk about it in length in my worst books of the year. It was bad. The first book in the Witcher series. I think it's technically a prequel. It's a short story collection, and it was absolutely awful. It's basically the exact same thing as a TV show, the Netflix show, but you just add a shit ton of misogyny. And because it is a short story collection, you get nothing. Like everyone's always raving about, oh, the world building is so good. You don't get anything here. The writing is incredibly dry. It could be the translation, but I was just really bored, and then you just add a bunch of useless comments. So yeah. Also, there's the fact that Gerald, the main male character, is meant to be like likable but morally gray, right? That's what I got from the TV show. And in the book, he's just a douche. I hated him. No, so many issues with it. So I didn't even finish it. I picked it up because I wanted to learn more about the witches, and I didn't get there. So it's such a short book. It's less than 300 pages, and I didn't make it past 200. So I think it was like 160 when I put it down. I so rarely DNF. It doesn't look like it in this video, but like I finished 130 something books this year. So 20 is my best I've ever done, but it's also not that bad. Anyway, in March, did not DNF any. In April, I DNF'd 1, and it's part of what I call my pile of shame, basically books that I started and I fully intend of continuing and finishing one day. Sometimes it takes me months, sometimes years before I do, but I will. And it is Sister Outsider. I actually DNF'd it because I was listening to it as an audiobook. It was a mistake. I couldn't follow. Like I would get distracted super easily. It happens sometimes. So I will be getting a physical copy and read it because I'm really looking forward to it. It's like a nonfiction feminist book. So we'll get to it when I get a physical copy. In May, I DNF'd 3. I did finish 14, so that May was crazy. So the first one I put down was When We Lost Our Heads, which is historical fiction. I read it because I had heard it had an interesting like complex female friendship, and I was really bored. It's not really my main genre, so I just wanted to give it a shot, and I put it down. There's no hard feelings, just wasn't for me. And then I also DNF No One Is Talking About This, which there are hard feelings here. I hated this. It's so short. I believe the audiobook was like 3 hours, maybe less. And I got to 50% and I put it down like in rage because it sucked so much. This is like a Twitter feed. Someone's just thoughts thrown at you. And I thought there would be some kind of social commentary, but you don't get any. So it feels very, very pointless. So I understand why no one is talking about this. No, but to be fair, I feel like I saw it and people were raving about it and I really don't get it. So it just wasn't for me. And then the last one I DNF'd that month was My Heart is a Chainsaw, which is a horror book that was part of the Goodreads Choice Award of 2021. So I wanted to try it and I put it down really quickly. Again, kind of a visceral reaction. Sometimes you start an audiobook or a book and you're just like, no, that's how I felt about it. There's nothing else to say. Horror for me in general tends to be quite hit and miss. So this was a no. June, crazy month. I DNF'd 5. The first one was Reincarnation Blues, and that one was one of the ones I had a very strong reaction, kind of like The Witcher. I picked it up because I hadn't heard anyone mention it, but I saw it on the list, read what it was about, and I got so excited. You have this man who is reliving his life over and over, but technically it's a different life. I think he has a certain amount that, I don't remember the number, like 1,000, 10,000 times, yeah. And he has to have like the perfect life in order to move on, but it keeps messing it up, not being perfect. Sometimes he's a good person, sometimes he's not, and that's kind of what you're following. And I love time loops. It's one of my favorite tropes, but this one I was kind of bored, and you add some misogyny. That's usually how it works for me. Like, if the book is really interesting, I might look past it, but not in this case. The first sentence first. That caught my eye. This is a story about a wise man named Milo. It begins on the day he was eaten by a shark. Of course I want to read this. But then at 36%, I put the book down because one of his life, he's the poor 15-year-old who goes to university early, he's bullied, no friends, and he is falsely accused of rape by the prettiest, most popular girl in the university, and he goes to prison. No. I am so tired of these horrible tropes. I don't even want to go into details. If you get it, you get it. No, thank you. I'm not reading that. I'm not reading that. A few people commented that there are other things that are problematic in the book, but I will never finish it, so I don't really care at this point. Next, The Lost Apothecary, which kind of modern witches vibes. I've been desperately trying to find a book that I like that contains witches, but like in modern-ish times. Like, think Practical Magic. The book is dated, but the movie is great, and I want that again. I like those vibes, and I thought maybe this would work because the reviews were really positive, but I was so freaking bored. I don't remember how far I went into it. I think like 60. Like, I went far into it. I was really trying to just, it's an audiobook. How hard is it to just listen, right? I couldn't do it. I was so bored. I barely remember anything because nothing happens. Like, literally nothing happens. So I was, no. Not for me. This is where I DNF'd 3 in like a week. I started what I now call my Read It or Unhaul It vlogs challenge. I'm gonna do it all year long in 2023. I'm so excited. But I did it with a bunch of books that were on the shelf specifically that contain a bunch of YA sci-fi and fantasy that I got years ago because I would see them on Booktube, but I've now kind of moved on from YA. I still find some that are great, but like generally speaking, if I haven't read them after 6 years, will I? So that's why I was trying them, reading the first chapter, deciding, am I continuing, am I not? I did find some that I liked, and then there are 3 that I am getting rid of next Unhaul video. The first one that I tried, I really tried to read, was Scorpio Races. It wasn't bad, but I just wasn't invested, and I kept mixing up the point of views. So I wasn't invested. It wasn't for me. And then the next 2, I don't even remember the titles. I didn't even write them down. I think one is the Book of Ivy. That one, I think it's the one I read one page and I got rid of it. And there was another one. We're moving on. They weren't worth it. The second one, I got rid of it after reading 1 chapter. So I need to do it again. Maybe if I have some time after the holidays or during the holidays, maybe I should do it again, specifically for the YA fantasy sci-fi, because I have a couple shelves that have a bunch that I just need to decide at this point. It doesn't matter if I read them or like I finish them or not. I just want to try them so I can just know and, move on with my life. It's been too long. Anyway, next we have July. Once again, DNF'd 4 books. I was on a roll during the summer. The first one was, it's because I did my Pile of Shame reading challenge. So I mentioned my Pile of Shame. So once a year, usually in July, I will try to give a second shot for a whole week to all the books that I put on that pile because I want to eventually get to them. That forces me to do so. So that's why I DNF'd 2 books that were part of my pile of shame. The first one was Kings of the Wild, which again, I got pretty far into it, but the first time I put it down after like 50, 60 pages, and this time I went like past the halfway point, but I just can't do it. It's an adult fantasy. It's so popular. Everyone says that it's so funny and so good, and I don't see it. It's just not for me. I mean, I'm not the target audience. The premise is really interesting. You have these 4 older men who used to be mercenaries. They were well-known kings of the wild. And one of them, their daughter is in trouble and they have to regroup and try and go and save her. Cool. And for the first 60%, nothing had happened because they were still trying to just get together to do... Come on. So it was boring. And then you add all the jokes, who frankly, I'm not the target audience for. I understand that, but I can only take so many eggplant jokes. Like, it just wasn't for me. So I am finally giving up on it. The second one was The Shining by Stephen King. Again, it was my second chance that I was trying to give it. The first time I got 100-something pages, I think, into it. And this time I got, again, past a midpoint, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I was bored. And then you know how Stephen King is. His books tend to be quite like violent, like sexually violent. And if the book is really good and it makes sense with the character, which it did, I will continue it. But if I'm not enjoying myself, like I'm reading for my own entertainment. Like, you know, that's why like if I want to be entertained, I don't want to necessarily read about misogyny or like read a misogynistic book or about a misogynistic character. If I wanted to read that, I would just go on the internet, you know? But I know the character is meant to be, but like his inner dialogue about his wife got to me. It got to me and I was bored, so I put it down. Next, I put down Severance, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic book. It gave me vibes a little bit of Emily St. John Mandel, like Station 11. If you love her, you probably will like this, but I'm kind of mad about her, so this one I put it down. You have this woman, you get flashbacks of her life prior to the events. I didn't get that much information, even by the point I put it down, but the audiobook is really short. I couldn't do it. There's just these weird conversations. She's trying to stay part of a group that is like weirdly religious, and she's trying to fit in, she's not fitting in, and I was bored, so I put it down. The last one that month that I put down was Exciting Times, which I picked up because I had heard someone say that it was similar to Fleabag, which I love Fleabag, but I don't think I like it for the same reason as the people that are saying that Exciting Times is similar to. I put this down so quickly. This is a good example of what I mean when I say like a visceral reaction. Like instantly I'm like, no, I don't like you. I can't stand you. And the main female character was so annoying and unpleasant. And she's like, I think she's a sugar baby or something. I had no interest. Like, again, visceral reaction. Maybe that's the weird, sexy parts in Fleabag that they related to this book. But I like Fleabag because of her relationship with her sister, not because of the events of season 1. Season 2, sure, but season 1, not really. So yes, I hated this, so I put it down. Not worth it. In August, once again, I put down 4 books. I was so successful with that challenge this year. The first one was Crime and Punishment. To my shame. I really, really thought this book was going to be a favorite. It's such a classic. It's a Russian classic, which, to be fair, if you're going to give up on a classic book, it's probably going to be a Russian classic. But I was so bored. I didn't love the writing or the character or the story. I get the message, but I didn't really feel like reading a book about an insufferable young man who's very privileged and mistreats every female character in his life. And thinks it's okay to murder a woman because he thinks he's morally superior. Like, even if he feels very guilty and that's his punishment, I still, no sympathy. It's not really the message of the book, but that's how I felt about it. Then, I don't think I mentioned that I even tried to read this book, but Bad Blood. I was listening to this one as I was painting this room, actually. And once again, I was kind of bored. It's a nonfiction. It's a real story, but it was just so negative, and I didn't feel like it, so I put it down. It is what it is. The Blinding Knife. This is the second book in the Black Prison series by Brent Weeks. This will also make it to my worst books of 2022, so I will reserve the snark for that video, but I had read book 1 and I thought I was going to give it 5 stars because it's so popular, adult fantasy with a magical school, which is one of my favorite tropes ever. But I was pretty bored, and then you add, once again, a bunch of sexism. And why? If I had been warned, at least. And this time I was prepared. I even arrived with my post-its, and there are so many post-its. I put a post-it every time there was some misogyny, which, you know what? Let me grab the book quickly. Do you see the amount of post-its on this thing? I didn't make it past page 75, 275, so chapter 60. So many chapters in here. Because of a very problematic scene that was the last drop for me. No. My problem with books like this one and The Witcher is that it feels sometimes like male authors can't figure out a way to show us that a character or a world is dark unless it's to tell us that every female character gets essayed. You know what I mean? And in this case, this main female character makes absolutely no freaking sense. And then the only point of view I didn't really care about the character, but I liked the storyline a bit. Then he does something really problematic, and he's not meant to be morally gray, or at least not evil. And anyway, I will be getting rid of every single book I own by the author. That was my last drop, basically. The Angel's Game. This one is kind of the opposite. I read book 1, and I really enjoyed it despite a little bit of sexism in there. I know some of it can be blamed for, like, it's historical fiction, men, blah, blah, whatever. I still felt like everything else was good enough that I looked past it. But then I got to book 2, and really early on, you have a scene where an older man takes a younger man under his wing and brings him to lose his virginity with a prostitute. And I was like, what am I doing? I don't want to read this. So I just put it down. I was bored already super early. So no. September, I DNF'd one book, and it was Every Last Chance, which is a mystery thriller, but I thought it was going to be fun, but it really when you read a book and every character is awful and it's fun because of it, I thought it was going to be like that, but I just ended up being like, no, actually, you're just all awful and I'm bored. The main female character married basically for money, and she's still trying to make it in life. Like, they moved to a nicer neighborhood, and she basically tries to get rid of her husband and get someone else's husband to be richer. And I got to a scene that was like a sexy scene. Turns out the author writes spicy books, and I was like, no, I don't want to read about this, so I put it down. October, I put one book down, and it was Fate and Furies, which was also part of a Read It or Unhaul It challenge. I put it down after one chapter because I was already not enjoying it. Another visceral reaction kind of book for me. It just wasn't for me. It happens. It wasn't even a mystery thriller. My challenge was mystery thrillers, and it was on the wrong shelf. So we've moved on. And then last but not least, in November, I put one book down, which is part of my pile of shame. I do want to eventually get to it, and it is Where the Red Ferns Grow. I read this during a 24 hours reading vlog where I was reading your saddest book recommendations, and a lot of you have been traumatized by this book in middle school, I think. And I didn't get to finish it because the 24 hours was ending, and I was really tired at that point, but it was okay. It definitely reads dated. I don't really care about the whole hunting thing, but there's a lot of comments of like, oh, boys are not like girls, blah, blah, which is like, ugh. But I do want to get to the sad part and see if it's going to make me cry, because I want to know. So maybe I'll do a part 2, and then I'll include that one that is now in my pile of shame. So, by the way, there's no hard feelings in the pile of shame. Sometimes I get comments being like, there's no reason to feel shame. There's not. I'm just making fun of myself. It's just funny. Because otherwise it feels very negative. Like, I feel like this whole video I'm complaining. I mean, it is the point of this whole video, right? All the books that I put down because I was bored or I found them problematic. So it is what it is. I feel like there are a few that I started that I am planning on picking up again. They just got returned to the library, like Earthlings. I barely started it and was returned to the library. So there are a few more like that, but you will see it whenever I finish them, if I get them again from the library. So 22-ish books that I DNF did not finish this year, and majority of them I'm not planning on finishing. I think I've only added 2 books to my pile of shame, which it's good that I'm not adding too many more books, because one day I would like to get it down to 0. Probably won't happen, but it would be nice. I guess it still gives me some opportunity to do another pile of shame challenge next year. During the summer, probably. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know in the comment section what books you did not finish this year. You started them, and then just whatever the reason, you can feel free to explain to us in the comment section. I will feel less alone with my reactions, and I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, including the beginning of this series. I did my most anticipated releases of 2023, and then soon I will be putting the rest, by the way, the best, the worst books that I've read throughout the year. That's coming up. This is book video number 2 for this challenge. And I also did a video where I reviewed all of the nonfiction books that I've read throughout the year, so I guess it's kind of unofficially part of this end of year series, and I will see you in an upcoming video very soon. Bye.